Jets fans, things have been going pretty okay for the past couple of days as the Jets are resting and recuperating, but unfortunately, Winnipeg got a bit of a double dose of bad news today, and quite honestly, it does impact not only Winnipeg's present, but potentially the future. We'll dive into what this news means for the Jets and how it might impact the rest of the season on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Jets fans, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform of choice, including Apple, Spotify, Google, Megaphone, Odyssey, and YouTube. Doing so is completely free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just really love and appreciate your support. Now, like I said at the top of the episode, a couple of really big things to dive into today. Some not so great news for the Jets and their prospects. And unfortunately, this is going to potentially have a big downstream impact, not only on this season, but on the next. Before we go any further, though, just wanted to let you know that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Now, like I said, the Jets got two pieces of bad news. Let's get the biggest one out of the way first. Chaz Lucius is officially going to miss the rest of the WHL season after suffering a shoulder injury while playing for the Portland Winterhawks. Apparently, he got hit or something. I haven't seen the footage of it, but it actually required him to get surgery, which really, really, really sucks. Lucius had basically been on a tear recently, was starting to look like that star prospect that we've all, really been hearing him hyped up as. Certainly we've seen flashes at the pro level of what Lucius may one day be. And, for Chaz, it's a huge setback. He's had a couple of, season-ending injuries over the past couple of years. Even if it wasn't season-ending, certainly it was season-shortening. He had a nasty ankle injury, some kind of a hand injury. Earlier this year, he had a shoulder injury, and now he's had another shoulder injury. So things just really haven't been going according to plan for Chaz. It seems like he has struggled to stay healthy. And, for Winnipeg, it's a little bit of a problem to deal with because, this is like Chaz's prime development time, right? Obviously, there are a lot of players who have kind of had to go through the same process. I think the best example of how long this process can take, especially for somebody who is unfortunately a little bit injury prone and occasionally aggravates the same injury. You look at Gabriel Velarde. He took, many, many years before he finally reached the NHL, and look how good he's been for the LA Kings. So there's something to be said for being patient, letting a guy work through this kind of stuff, and trusting in their ability to still be a top-end NHLer, especially with the right guidance, rehabilitation, and proper planning. So I think for Lucius, obviously this is a setback, and he hasn't had the same issue quite of having, the same injuries to the same areas multiple times. But I do think, longer term for him, it's going to be important for the Jets to kind of manage his load, make sure that he's not pushing himself too hard, and that he stays healthy and safe. I think that for Winnipeg is probably one of their biggest concerns. Just making sure that he doesn't get into any serious situations, making sure that he can continue his development track, because obviously he had like 15 points in 6 games. It was clear that with the Winterhawks, he was really starting to light it up. He was looking like one of the WHL's top stars. He was pushing the Winterhawks into a more competitive direction. So for basically everyone involved, this is a super, super tough blow. Now, I said that this doesn't just impact the season, but beyond, right? So the future, obviously, you want to make sure that that Lucius is staying healthy and that he continues his progress once he returns from injury. But in the present for the Jets, Lucius was one of the biggest prospects that Winnipeg could have offered for somebody like Timo Meier. And I think with this injury, I don't think it should be the be all end all uh, of like a deal breaker, right? I don't think it should be viewed as him having, the same injury history as somebody like Velarde. But I do think it makes you wonder a little bit, right? If you acquire this kid in a trade for, say, Timo Meier or any number of other top end NHLers, what is his projectability like? Is he likely to make the NHL? Is he likely to stay healthy enough to go through pro hockey? I think there are legitimate questions about that. Although, for my taste, I think, even just being a biased fan, I feel like it's a little bit too soon to say that. You do kind of wonder just a little bit, but not enough to where I feel like a team would walk away from the sheer level of talent that Lucius has. They've seen him when he's healthy and what he looks like, and they know that he can be a truly dynamic force. And you might look at the injuries to multiple parts of his body and say, maybe it's just a little bit of bad luck, right? Past couple of years, you have a couple of freak injuries or something. A lot of guys go through the same process. Maybe some of them, unfortunately play through it, but other guys, they get shut down partway through the season, making sure that they don't really injure themselves further and kind of risk their careers. So I think for Lucius, I'm not too concerned yet, but I do think at the trade deadline, it might change his value a little bit. Maybe Lambert becomes the central piece of a future trade. Maybe Lucius is the guy who ends up staying with the Jets and one day eventually, cracks the score and becomes a major member. I'm curious to kind of see how teams evaluate that. I think that is a legitimate question, especially as we're getting closer and closer to the trade deadline. Does that really impact Lucius's ability to maybe be moved as part of a major package? I think for the Sharks, with their timeline, not necessarily. I think they would still look at Lucius as a prime young player who eventually would become a major part of their team. They're not really worried so much about him being an impact player right now. So as long as you're patient, you let him heal up and you let him develop properly, you still expect him to be a future part of that eventual Sharks core. So if the focus is more on the long term, I think that would work to Winnipeg's benefit. But I think if it's a team that's asking for a present pro player right now, obviously he doesn't really fit that bill. And so, yeah, you might be in a little bit of a different situation. But by the same token, he wasn't even a pro player at the NHL level earlier this season. So it's not like that part has necessarily changed. It's just, will he be available for the rest of the year? Obviously not. So, something to keep an eye on, but I do think for the Jets at least it is really frustrating, and for Lucius it really sucks. He was starting to light it up. He was looking really phenomenal, and it's a shame that such a promising young season was cut short in the manner that it was. But unfortunately for the Jets, it wasn't the only suboptimal piece of news. In just a moment, we're going to dive into one of our players from across the pond, so to speak, somebody who is playing in the KHL and has decided to maybe make a bit of a different career move than I think the Jets were expecting. We'll talk about this player and how this might impact Winnipeg's future in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners that I mentioned at the top of the episode at FanDuel. This year, the only app that you need at your Super Bowl party is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're really excited about our new sports betting partner because they're the #1 sportsbook in America, and like I said, that's FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make the betting on sports fun and super easy. Download FanDuel right now so you can bet Super Bowl 57 with a no-sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything from the money line to point spreads to how many touchdowns you might see from an individual player. So obviously, this upcoming weekend, Super Bowl Sunday, you might be wondering, is it going to be Jalen Hurts or is it going to be Patrick Mahomes tossing 3 to 4 TDs? I think I would put my money on Jalen Hurts having the over for touchdowns this game. He's been torching most really good defenses. And Mahomes, he had an ankle injury, still pulled off a really big win against the Bengals, but you don't really want to bet on it too much if that injury is lingering. So, something to think about as Super Bowl Sunday approaches. But no matter who you pick and place your bet on, FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and it's super easy to use. And best of all, you can get your winnings paid instantly, which we all love a little bit of instant gratification. So join FanDuel today at fanduel.com/lockedon to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That's fanduel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. Like I said earlier in the episode, we are just diving into some frustrating news for the Jets recently regarding some of their prospects. It's not been the most ideal of situations. Lucius getting shut down for the rest of the season is a massive blow both to Lucius and Winnipeg. Was really hoping for him to have a healthy year and build his skill sets and confidence at the WHL level. And unfortunately, just thanks to the cosmic irony and frustration of pro and junior level hockey, the injury gods have unfortunately decided to visit him again and strike him down. So really sucks, but Lucius is a really tough kid. He seems to bounce back a lot. So I'm hoping that this is just, one of, the handful of temporary setbacks that he has had. He's had some bigger injuries previously. So, it's not like this is the first time he's had surgery, and he came back and looked, pretty darn good even then. So hoping for a quick recovery, want to see him back. But the other piece of not so great Jets news is Rashevsky, who's been with the KHL. He is actually renewing his contract for 2 years, which on the face of it is good for Rashevsky, but not so good for the Jets, right? Dmitri is currently playing with Dynamo Moscow, and for the Jets, I think they were expecting Rashevsky to potentially come over to Winnipeg sometime in the next year or so. Instead, they're just going to have to be, sitting there on their hands waiting for a guy who's been really, really dominant. He's got 30 points in 59 games so far. He's been an excellent attacking presence. Last year, he had 35 points in 48 games. And, generally at the pro level, he's just been an excellent scorer, somebody that I think the Jets were likely expecting to be somewhere in the middle six to potentially even top six sort of contributor, a great scorer, somebody, when you look at the footage of how he attacks the offensive area, he's great near the faceoff circles. His spatial awareness is great. He always seems to know where the dangerous and soft spots in defensive coverages is, and he'll often make goalies pay for the lapses of their defenses. So it's a curious decision. I don't know if he's just comfortable playing in Russia right now, or if the geopolitical climate has maybe had some level of impact on his ability to potentially, come overseas. Does he feel comfortable doing so? I don't quite know what his rationale is, but for the Jets, at least, it is a little bit concerning. We've seen Ivan Telegin, who, ended up staying in Russia, never came over, and he's been a decently serviceable player at the KHL level, but I think Rashevsky certainly has more potential to be an actual attacking presence. I don't think it's like a Kaprizov situation where Kirill has, almost like 30 goals already this season. I don't think Rashevsky is necessarily that level of player, but somebody who would have been potentially like that third line piece that the Jets are missing, right? Dmitri has been a really balanced attacking scorer and somebody who has a lot of drive whenever he attacks the slot area. So I think, if you were looking for that third line winger to really complete this top 9 unit on top of anyone that they acquire in a trade, it is kind of, frustrating that he's not going to be that for at least another 2 years. And I think I would have liked to have seen Dmitri joining the Jets sooner so that he can get used to North American ice, get used to the AHL and NHL level of games, and kind of familiarize himself with how Winnipeg wants to play. But he said no for the time being. I can't necessarily blame him. I understand that there's probably a lot of extenuating factors and circumstances that are really keeping him over there. But, all the same, disappointing. Just not really a great run of, prospect news pieces. At least Lambert is still killing it for the Jets. So in that respect, it could be worse. Rucker McGroarty with Michigan, I think it is, has been doing really, really well, scoring tons of goals. And Rucker, his offensive positioning kind of the same thing that you see with Rashevsky, very smart player, but potentially even more prolific. I think McGroarty's ceiling remains a lot higher than I thought at the time of the draft. I wasn't really aware of just how good of a prospect he was back then. And while his mobility might still be, not on the same level of some of these other prospects like Rashevsky, who is probably close to being NHL ready, still Rucker will probably be a punishing scorer and somebody that I think for the Jets has the potential to be a real gem. So for all of the bad news, there's still plenty of positive signs coming in the next few months and years. So don't, get too down, but just something to keep an eye on for the Jets. And hopefully, the future core will come together sooner rather than later and show us that next era of Winnipeg hockey. Now, speaking of roster changes and stuff, I've seen a lot of discussion about a certain player that the Jets might be interested in, right? From the Ottawa Senators. And, actually, one of our commenters here was asking about him and what I thought about him. And I think this player is very intriguing, somebody that the Jets should definitely take a look at. And in many ways, it would kind of be coming full circle because, he was taken after Logan Stanley. But if the Jets were to acquire him, maybe he would be the player who ends up outlasting Stanley with the Winnipeg Jets tenure. We'll dive into this player in just a little bit, but before we go any further, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Athletic Greens. Our next partner has a product that I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 from Athletic Greens because I was looking for a boost to my immune system, something to get my day going, and a bit of a supercharge to that frontline defense against the common bacteria and viruses we're all facing. Obviously, winter and fall have been pretty brutal on all of us, and there has never been a better time to arm yourself with something a little bit more sustaining. If you're wondering what AG1 is, it's a scoop mixed in with a cup of water that helps you absorb 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you're dealing with keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free dietary restrictions. There's no GMOs, no nasty chemicals, no nasty or dangerous additives. It contains less than 1 gram of sugar. It tastes great. And best of all, it is really affordable. It's less than $3 a day, which is way cheaper than that cold brew habit you've probably got going. And with over 7,000 five-star reviews and plenty of fans like pro athletes and trainers, AG1 is perfect for you. It's a great lifestyle change, and it is a very easy micro habit to get into. So right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just 1 scoop in a cup of water every day. And that's it. No need for a million different pills or supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you got to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets. We are just wrapping up really quickly with some final thoughts on a potential trade acquisition for the Jets, somebody who I think Winnipeg probably has a modicum of interest in. This player, feels like kind of the one that got away from the Jets. A kid who was drafted after Logan Stanley. At the time, Stanley was, he was a controversial pick from day one. We all knew that, his NHL ceiling was going to be a little more modest than I think you were hoping for. A guy who might comfortably become one day a 7th defender or maybe like a number 60, but not much more than that. And the player who was taken after him that we're talking about is Alex DeBrincat, man. And if you've ever seen like DeBrincat play and you've seen him plenty enough terrorize the Jets, you know that Alex is one of the league's most premier scorers, an amazing, amazing attacker, somebody who's super elusive in space, extremely creative. He's got vision in passing and extremely soft hands for days. His release is nasty. It's very quick, very precise, very accurate, and he loves going top shelf against goalies. He can find those soft gaps. He knows how to get right between defenders, and he's not afraid to mix it up in the low slot area along the walls. DeBrincat's just such a versatile threat, and if you're looking for a guy who would potentially be your alternative to Timo Meier and is actually a little bit younger, DeBrincat is a fascinating choice. Ottawa had already been scouting the Jets for a potential right-handed D, I believe. And say right, like if you're thinking about Neil Pionk to the Sens, would a swap there where you have Pionk, maybe Lambert or Lucius, and some kind of a top level pick as part of this major salary and futures package for DeBrincat, would something like that get it done? I personally don't know, just because I don't know how the Sens view somebody like Pionk. And, I think Lambert, Lucius, all of those kids would certainly become a major part of their future core. But with how they've kind of done stuff recently, they're really pushing to become a team that's competitive now. So I have a hard time feeling that futures are what they're looking for. But by the same token, the Sens also know that they're at the bottom of the standings, and there's not really a clear pathway for them to get back into playoff contention this year. So, would they be more focused on next season? Hard to say. If I were the Sens, I personally would not be trading DeBrincat. I think he's one of this league's best scorers. He's a ton of fun, and I think you sell a little bit low on him right now. He's had 41 points in 50 games, so it's not like he isn't scoring. I don't know if the impression of him and like the perception of him is that he's a poor player. If anything, he's been one of Ottawa's better attackers. So I really hesitate to imagine that the Sens are that hard up to get rid of him, especially after they made pretty big waves to actually acquire him in the first place. But he is going to need a major extension. His contract is running up really soon. So if Ottawa feels that he doesn't have a long term future, I would go out and chase him, especially if Meier is not the player the Jets end up bringing home first. But a lot of things to consider with DeBrincat. I think that there's a real fit if the Sens are still interested in maybe doing a deal for a defender. Maybe this is where Logan Stanley gets moved. Could you imagine Stanley being part of a trade for DeBrincat? What a time to be alive. But all the same, if the Jets want, another top level score option, Alex checks off all the boxes. And like I said, he may not be on the level of a Timo Meier 100%, but he comes pretty darn close, and he's a phenomenal player in his own right. Somebody that I would love to see suiting up in the Navy. So let me know your thoughts on DeBrincat. If you want to see him as a Winnipeg Jet in the future, drop your thoughts in the YouTube comments below, or at my social medias at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets on Twitter. For tonight's episode, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. And as always, I thank you. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform of choice. But for tonight's episode, that's all the time that we have. We will see you back here tomorrow. So again, thanks for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.